So, Cody, as I was watching this episode of Expedition Unknown, Season 13, Episode 6.
We made it.
Yeah. As I was watching this, I was developing some questions and some ideas, a little bit behind the scenes stuff.
Oh.
But before I kind of get into that, because I do want to have a conversation about that before we even get into the episode, I should say that this is Pop Culture Pastor Watch-Alongs. Welcome.
Welcome, welcome, welcome.
My name's Dave. Cody's here.
I am.
And watch-alongs is just we pick a show, we go episode by episode as we're watching along, then we talk about it.
We do. And I'm excited to talk about this one.
Are you?
I am, because literally this episode caused me to think of a song. Like the whole episode. I had a song in my head.
I think I know which one. Yeah.
Yeah.
You are a child of the 80s.
I am.
So, what I wanted to talk about was this episode, in its structure and what he was after, was very similar to the episode 2 episodes ago, where they were off looking for the Barracudas.
Kinda.
The World War II planes. But it was structured differently, which got me to thinking, does this show have, like, writers? Does someone, like, actually... Is there someone in charge that actually kind of starts putting the things together, decides what order they're going to go in, Josh is going to go in, and likes how they're going to narrate the episode? Because if you remember, the Barracuda episode, we thought it was weird that they saved the honor piece for the end of the episode. Because we talked about how if that was presented at the beginning of the episode, it might have given it extra weight. And I think with this episode, we saw that we were right.
So they definitely do have someone that's in charge of, like, the order that the footage is going to be shown and the narration behind it. But I think this one differs just because there's something very specific. It's not just all the wax.
Yeah, you're talking about one
plane. And it went down, and there's a purpose behind looking for it, not just, we need bits and pieces for a museum piece.
Yeah. So let me ask you this, and I'm still, like, thinking abstractly behind the scenes. When they're trying to come up with an idea for an episode, so they have an idea, they have a connection. They're like, oh, these people are looking in this part of the world for this, and they start coming up with an idea for the episode. Do you think they film the pieces first and then cobble it together in a narrative they want after the fact? Or do you think they have the narrative in mind and before they film all the pieces?
It might be a mixture of both. There might be some episodes where you can definitely lay out step by step how you want it to be shown. But there's probably episodes where they have found things that altered the way that they might have mapped out the episode originally.
Yeah, I think it's a good answer. Also, step by step, oh baby. Not a New Kids fan?
Yes, I am a child of the 80s, but I keep it classy with my rock.
No, I can't hear someone say step by step and not think about that song.
I thought of the TV show.
With the Duffy?
Yeah.
With Patrick Duffy and Suzanne Summers?
That one.
Yeah. Also,
that's where my brain goes whenever I hear step by step.
I mean, my brain pretty much explodes with pop culture references every time anyone says anything.
So, yes.
In that way, I think we would get along with Josh.
We would.
He has moments in this episode specifically that we'll get to where I'm like, yeah, he's one of us.
He's one of us.
Yes.
He's one of us.
So the episode begins where Josh is talking about the Women's Army Corps, the WACs.
Yeah.
As they're called lovingly. The first women to serve in the Army with full military status. They were usually specialists. And the group we are focusing on in this bit of history worked in air traffic command. And they were in West Africa. And this is immediately carries some weight because we learn we're looking for an airplane wreck These ladies never made it to their destination. 18 of 27 women that were missing in action in World War II are from this accident.
Heartbreaking.
Yeah. So it's another plane wreck episode where Josh is seeking something far more important than history. They're seeking honor. And there's nothing left to do but to get into it. And you know how we do that, Cody.
How do we do that?
The past is all around us. A world of mystery, danger, and honor. We travel the roughly 0.8 mile from our houses to the recording studio to podcast about Josh's travels to the far corners of the earth to find where legends end and history begins. I'm Dave Rimbold. He's Cody Haviland. And this is Pop Culture Pastor Watch-Alongs.
Ayo.
That's getting better, isn't it?
I really feel like we're almost Warner Brothers, HBO Max worthy intro level.
Like, can we just send us a couple producers, HBO Max? Just send us a couple producers. We could totally be like a companion piece to their show.
It's basically like The Walking Dead had The Talking Dead or whatever that show was.
I'm like Chris Hardwick before we found out maybe he's not nice. Now you're Chris Hardwick.
No, I don't think that's how that works.
Just kidding. That was all allegedly. There was some question to whether... Anyways, we don't have to talk about Chris Hardwick.
Yeah, we're not diving into that mess.
So they were stationed on West Africa, as I said, and their flight takes off. They experience some sort of trouble. This is all documented. But they go down in the ocean somewhere near the capital of the Ivory Coast. Near there, I suppose. And so Josh goes to Fort Greg Adams, which is a few hours south of Washington, D.C., to talk to Tracy Bradford, curator of the U.S. Army Women's Museum.
I did not know this museum existed, and I have been close to that area before.
Yeah, right? Me too.
So I'm disappointed.
At what age did you go to D.C.?
I was about to turn 17.
Okay, you got to go a little bit older and appreciate it more, probably. I think I went when I was around 13. I don't think I was quite old enough to appreciate it. I want to go back. I remember being really moved by Arlington Cemetery.
Yes.
I thought that was great, but I don't think I got it. I was old enough, really mature enough to get everything I could get out of like the Smithsonian, especially, and the monuments and the Capitol. I was in the Capitol, in the White House.
I was in the Capitol, not the White House.
You didn't go to the White House?
No.
It was pretty cool. I did not see anybody important.
Did you see Sinbad?
I did not see Sinbad. He was not on duty for the Secret Service that day. He might have been on duty a couple weeks ago. Anyways, so he goes to talk to Tracy Bradford. She says to understand the wax, you have to go back to the beginning, to the American Revolution. They kind of start talking about all these things. She even quotes... this, I can't remember who she quoted. American woman power is a power that can win this war. Do you remember that quote? Who was that? Oh no, that was the quote from the reel.
Oh yeah.
So you know the newsreels they used to show before movies. So it would have gone like this: American woman power is a power that can win this war. You remember the newsreels?
Yes.
You're not a child. You're not a child of the 40s, apparently. But yeah, so Josh is learning here, and then he says that his grandmother served in the British version of the wax, which were sort of like the, I guess, the inspiration for the American version.
Yes, and you get a heartwarming moment of Josh talking about a picture of his grandmama in her uniform.
Yeah, and... It's shocking how much I have in common with Josh.
I was going to say, as I was watching this, a day after it drops, I'm thinking, oh, Josh and Dave have another thing in common.
Yeah. We both love pop culture. We both have grandmothers that were from England. We're both ravishingly handsome.
Name it and claim it.
That's right. During the course of World War II, 150,000 women were deployed around the world. That number shocked me, but it should be a reminder just to how, I mean, gosh, we talk about things now like they're earth shattering, Everything's so huge. And especially when it comes to World War II, I wish more people could balance the present with the scale of history and humanity, because I know that like people can get all riled up talking about, for instance, the Israel Hamas Gaza situation, right? And the loss of life there. And, we're not going to say anything other than, yeah, that sucks. That's terrible. But also, it's war. And I don't know that given humanity's history, if we're going to have war, that we can eliminate it. Because World War II is just awful.
It's supposed to be the war that ends all wars.
I mean, civilian loss of life is just terrible.
But of course, they said that at the end of World War I as well.
Yeah, World War I, it made more sense for them to say it after World War I because it was shocking, the loss of life, comparatively speaking to what war had been before that. So World War I was just a dreadful. People really thought the world was ending, and it was probably the one time where they were allowed to without people being like, "Stop, you're exaggerating." But World War II is similar in that just the civilian casualties are just absurd. And I don't know. I only bring that up to say there's a lot of things we go in the world that we have strong opinions on. And we want to say one side's good and one side's bad. We want to defend one side or the other. And I'm just here to tell you, no, Sherman said this, war is hell, and it can't be refined. And I tend to believe him. I tend to think he's right. Now, Sherman was saying it to defend what he did on his march from Atlanta to the sea, where he's burning things. He's not a great dude, but I think he was speaking some truth.
Yeah. Loss of life is traumatic. And if you witness some of the horrific scenes of destruction that are left in the wake of a war zone area, it's not good for you physically, mentally, spiritually. So, yes.
Yeah. As always, anytime we talk about war stuff, my thoughts are with the people, the ordinary, everyday humans who just want to live life, who are caught in the middle of it. Caught in the middle of the powers that be, because the powers are the ones making all the decisions. And it's the normal people caught in the middle. And that just kind of stinks, but it is our world, and this is kind of who we are. And we're talking about World War II here. 150,000 women deployed around the world for the United States. And many of the women stayed on after the surrender of Germany, even after they were given the opportunity to go home.
Including this troop.
Yeah, and this was a group of women that's exactly what was happening. They were being redeployed to Europe to help go to Europe to strengthen the rebuilding of war-torn Europe. So this is an incredibly sad episode. When I think about this, where you had 18 women and then the 3 men, were there 3?
Yeah.
Crew members. If you've never had to hear news that someone close to you is lost in an accident, the feeling that comes with is it's very surreal. Like it feels like it's not real life. Like you can't even grieve at first. And for some people, it takes a long time to hit the grieving part. I'm sure you could speak to that, being a mental health guy.
Especially when there's no word on what actually happens.
Yeah.
So there's no real closure. And if you don't have a site to visit, a body to bury, you don't get the goodbye portion out of the way. And so a lot of people can stay stuck in a prolonged grief. And just the tragedies that do happen, that there is a site or there is bodies that are recovered, that can still cause a prolonged grief. And so it's very difficult when you lose someone suddenly and you weren't really expecting it.
Yeah.
It's just out of the blue and your world stops.
Yeah. And of course, the people who needed that closure are probably long gone. But what is left is we can still honor that. We can still honor the memory of these service women and men by finding this boat. And that's what Josh is setting out to do. So he first goes to California. He meets Mike Nightingale and Steve Rose, who are pilots. He's going to ride in a C-47. I'm not sure what expertise this is going to give Josh by riding a Goonie bird, but it was kind of cool.
It was cool, and I think it's more for the viewer to see, like, okay, this is the aircraft they were in. This is the technology we're dealing with. And these two men have the flight maintenance before they take off of maybe a landing gear sticking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 1936 to 1940 tech. Mike Nightingale, who's got a cool name, thinks he knows what happened. He thinks engine failure. You lose one engine, it's a big problem. The other one can make up for a little bit, but it's not a good situation. It's very tenuous. Steve Rose, as you mentioned, thinks that it was a landing gear issue. None of it really matters. The plane went down. That's all that really matters. But I will say that they do mention that since it was wartime and there was a lot of turnover because they were losing people, there was less experience, less pilot experience during that portion of the war. And that always puts on the table the dreaded pilot error. So if today the FAA would investigate any sort of crash, any flight crash, and if they can't prove it was a technical error or an engine failure or something like that, a machinery error, then the standard thing to fall on is pilot error,
which is heartbreaking.
Yes, because that closure we were talking about, that hurts. That hurts the families of the pilots. And so to find the wreck is a big deal for multiple reasons.
I kind of wanted them to talk about how much they thought would still be in existence if it crashed in the ocean.
Yeah.
Like, salt water is corrosive.
Yeah. So Josh goes back to the Ivory Coast to Abidjan. Yeah, he went there.
He did go there.
The capital of the Ivory Coast, Abidjan, world's largest exporter of cacao. He may have pronounced it cacao, yeah. And that was kind of funny, by the way, because he had some funny riffs, which he didn't have as many. I think because of the nature of this episode, he wasn't in quite full jokey mode.
I was going to say, he was a lot more serious this episode. And so where I was waiting for him to really reference Cheap Trick, he did not.
No. Yeah, and he's kind of funny there. It's like, what else do you have? Just keep bringing it. Bring more of the chocolate. That was a big deal. One of the largest cacao exporters in the world, which is apparently a central ingredient in chocolate.
Word.
I'm not sure how that works. They didn't explain it. But when Josh is walking around the street market and he starts dancing with the ladies and he's just generally very happy. The people around him are happy. Did that give you Indiana Jones vibes?
A little bit.
Indy was always the archaeologist he was because of the way he could joyfully mix into other cultures.
So I think this show does capture Josh doing that quite a bit.
Yeah.
Over the 13 seasons, that he tries to not only give you the historical context of whatever they're searching for and trying to actually search for it, but he gives you some of the cultural context of where they're at today and by his interactions with the locals.
Yeah. I'm just going to say it. Watching Josh interact with foreign peoples, it's like a good remedy for being on X too long, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, social media. It brings back my hope in humanity, just how happy those people were. Total strangers, people from different cultures, and they were having fun and they were smiling, and that's what we were meant for as humans. We were meant to connect with each other and not be so angry.
Quit being angry, people.
Yeah. So he finds out that he needs to drive up the coast to San Pedro. I had a dream about San Pedro. which he references, and I just died when he did. He goes up there to meet Project Recover co-founders Mark Moline, Colin Colburn, and underwater archaeologist Andrew Big Trucker. I don't know how to say his name.
So
I just wrote Big Trucker.
Nailed it.
I know. There's one dude every episode whose name is just like unsayable. And
that's why we need to have these people on the show so they can say their own name.
That would be great. Project Recover is, by the way, is pretty cool. It's a nonprofit dedicated to finding MIA Americans from World War II.
So this isn't the first interaction Josh has had with these people.
Nope.
So I was like, hey, familiar faces, friends of the show.
Yeah. And this is cool. Like, I really dig that there's people who care about this sort of thing. I think there's another one, another big one, maybe Unknown Soldier. I can't remember the name of it, but there's another organization that does this. Like, their whole reason for being is to go find MIAs, POWs that were Americans lost in war, and they haven't been found. And that's the whole point, is to go find them, bring honor back to their families, bring closure. And so I dig this. This is a mission I can get behind. But yes, they're old friends of Josh's. They've worked together before, and they start going over. The military, of course, has records. They investigated it, and they literally have a map. And does X actually mark the spot?
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe. It seems like it at the time, and you're like, oh my goodness, that is very Indiana Jones. And this time it does mark the spot. Even Indy said it never marks the spot.
Oh, Indy.
So they're reading through the investigations. Of course, it crashed near a fishing village. The Army investigation says they found oil slick on the water. They called it mysterious. My question is oil slick mysterious if it's near a site where someone witnessed a crash? Is that really mysterious?
So it kind of depends. If the crash happened immediately in that area, not that mysterious. But
yeah, how long did it take?
If it happened like 30 miles up the coast, that might be a sign of something mechanically happening that, like, oh, yeah, this oil being here is interesting.
And it is unclear how long after the fact it takes them to get the investigation up there. They've got 21st century sonar, which it looks like a torpedo.
It did.
Which was kind of cool. And it's autonomous. So it's like a Roomba. He describes it as like a millions of dollar Roomba.
Must be nice.
Yeah. And so they're going to put that in water. It's going to do its work. And while they do that, they go to this fishing village, Monogaga, not to be confused with Lady Gaga.
Completely different.
And it's immediately you get a much different vibe in this fishing village than the cities he's been in on the Ivory Coast there, that's kind of wild, right? To be like here, it's not like if I go to Los Angeles and then I come to our little small town, people are going to be vastly different.
Oh, yeah.
We have fast food joints. Like, there's things about our lives that just aren't going to be that far apart. This is like night and day. The cities looked like maybe a city you could be in here in the United States, but they go to this fishing village and it's like they step back in time. And they speak French, and Josh starts speaking to some of the people there. I thought this was a really cool moment because I think sometimes because this is a TV show and Josh is so entertaining, it's easy to forget how qualified Josh is at this work. Seeing him speak fluent French with the village folk kind of reminds you of like, oh yeah, Josh is very qualified for this. He's actually an archaeologist, which I took Archaeology 101. I can tell you, whatever you think it is, it's much more studious and in-depth than you think.
And he's highly intelligent.
Yeah, well, you'd have to be. I didn't go any farther in archaeology, even though I was interested in it, because I was like, oh, this is for smart people. I thought I was just going to be Indiana Jones.
Very few of us ever do make it to the indie level.
Yeah, they said the first thing the instructor said at college was, I've been an archaeologist for 30 whatever years, and I've never carried a whip or a gun. And I was like, I'm out.
That sounds like a personal choice, buddy.
Yeah, right. Well, you could have carried, They need to speak with the oldest person in the village. This is how we talked about this last episode, where part of the job of archaeology, what makes these people good at it, is they understand that maybe the best information they can get are from the old timers in the community that whatever you're trying to study has been around. So they're looking for the oldest person in the village. They find him. Is he 100? Is that what they said? He does not look 100. He looks great.
They said he has to be around 100. Now, I kind of question it, but who am I to disagree?
Yeah. Who are you? Cra Pierre Ganessia. And I just love he had like 2 African names and then clearly the French name. Like, yay, colonialism.
Oh, yes.
It's part of history. He seems real lovely, though, like a lovely man. And they talk to him. He's lived there his whole life. And he doesn't really have a lot of information to give. But what they find out from him, that's the operative piece, is nothing washes up on shore. He said the ocean just is said to have just swallowed it up.
I kind of wondered, you can see things from a good distance with the right conditions, and like a crash is going to cause a commotion, but
do you think they underestimated the distance, how far it actually was offshore?
That's my theory, but
it's a good theory.
The ocean's a vast place. I'm amazed that they ever find anything, even when like Josh is diving and they're like, oh, this is a different boat. I'm like, you found it. That's impressive.
No sadness here. You found it. So they get this operative piece of information from the guy, even though it's not what they wanted to hear and it's not going to help them. But then they go back and they take a look at the sonar results, and the sonar has several hits, a line of what appears to be like debris or stuff on the bottom, and then a bigger thing off on its own. And they're both pretty encouraging. And so they're diving. Almost seems like an episode thing now. Well, seems like we're going diving at some point.
And I feel it's like a 60-40.
How dare you disagree with me? Nothing on the bottom here. Was that kind of surprising? It looked very smooth. There wasn't a lot of life. A lot of the recent dives Josh has been on, there's been plenty of life and fish and sharks. But even as far as land features on the bottom, there was not much to speak of. It was just flat.
Yeah. And I definitely think that it just might not be the correct spot in this area.
Yeah. That is especially given where the episode ends up, it's especially probably true. Because the first line of stuff they find were mussel beds, which surprisingly are not where Jean-Claude Van Damme sleeps.
Nope.
No, these are like snails. Are mussels snails? Is that what they are? You don't know? You wouldn't need snails. Who am I asking? That was dumb. I can't believe I asked you that.
You don't know if I eat escargot or not.
Is that on a cheeseburger? No, I don't know what it is. So yeah, the whole first line of things, which speaks to the fact of how little there is on this seafloor.
Yeah.
They literally, the sonar read these mussel beds, and they don't look that big at all. So if the sonar was reading them, that's pretty impressive. But that's what the first set are. And the end of this episode really had me. Like, I was intense. Like, I was really wanting to find it. They did a good job. Like I said, they structured the episode in a way where I felt like I was really getting strung along and I was really invested in it. And the thing they find is a rock. But first, chocolate hooch.
They do like these little side interludes towards the end of the episode.
Josh said it was the first time I'm going to get drunk on chocolate, as he tried to convince the lady to bottle this and sell it, which she apparently had never had the inclination to do. But I tend to think that Josh is probably a man who knows his adult beverages.
If previous episodes have taught me anything, and he definitely does.
I don't think he's blowing smoke. I think whatever he had a taste of, it was pretty tasty. I would know. I'd be interested, although I don't do that anymore. When I became a pastor, I had to promise I wasn't ever going to drink alcohol or smoke again, which I don't mind. It's not a big deal to me. But I'm always a little nervous about people who homemake adult beverages, because one time I knew this girl who was from Eastern Europe, and she made her own in like her dorm room. Oh man, it was like burn your esophagus off. That stuff's not fit for consumption.
It's not.
But that was a lifetime ago. But that's always what I think of when people are like, "Oh yeah, I make my own." You know, he calls it moonshine, which is like the American version.
Yeah, it looked interesting, and he's right. She could be making buku bucks off of chocolate flavored alcohol. So.
And buku is actually the right word, since these people will speak French.
Oui,
just like Cody, apparently. So back to the story. They build it up. They go to commercial. Like, oh, what is this? It's a sonar had read something sticking up from the ocean floor like 10 feet. It's a rock. And I literally in my living room, like, oh man.
And not Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson.
No, that would have been much cooler. No, it's like a monolith like shaped rock. It's very weird that it's there.
Especially considering how flat and unremarkable everything else around it is.
If our homie from Ancient Aliens was on the show, he'd be like, well, that's weird. I think we all know who put that there.
Could it be extraterrestrials?
So they don't find anything. They do manage to manufacture a little drama on the ascent. Like he's like, oh, we only got a couple minutes. We got to get out of here.
They do tend to push it with the amount of oxygen or air in the tank and how much time you can spend at that depth. I'm like, Josh, you don't got to risk it, buddy.
Yeah, why are we waiting so long? It was a rock, y'all. But the visibility was bad, and this is just heartbreaking. I actually felt heartbroken at the end of this episode that they didn't find anything, so they didn't get the end they wanted. But as they say in the show, that featuring the story on the show alone goes a long way, is a big deal in honoring the soldiers lost.
It does, and they have a very moving piece at the end where they read off all the names. I will say, I think that whenever you have this, you can definitely have people that become more interested and more invested, and that might get more resources to teams that actually want to try to find this wreckage and bring about some clarity to what happened and some honor and peace to the families of those whose lives were cut tragically short.
Oh, for sure. And Project Recover being a nonprofit, working for a nonprofit, I can tell you that volunteers are always a thing.
You betcha.
And so if you have some way that you think you can help in things like this, even as someone who's a researcher, man, I bet they would not turn that down. So yeah, if this is something you're interested in, you should check into avenues of how you can help. It's good stuff.
It is.
Overall, I thought it was a pretty good episode. What were your favorite Josh quotes?
So I was so disappointed that he didn't reference surrender that I was like completely taken out of the quotes besides the talking about getting drunk off chocolate.
Yeah, the chocolate hooch
Yeah.
quote was pretty funny. Of course, we did mention that he pulls it back a little bit, which I think is probably the right move in an episode like this. But I did laugh when he meets the fellas from Project Recovery. He's like, why do we only meet on remote docks? Which is a very, like, to me, that seems like a very staged, it's kind of an inside joke, but also like a movie joke, like Indiana Jones would probably meet people on a remote dock. But I think my favorite quote was definitely when he says, we're going to San Pedro. And then he's in the car. He's like, last night I dreamt of San Pedro. That's a Madonna song.
It is.
So I enjoyed that little piece of humor. And then now that song's been stuck in my head ever since.
Yeah, we've had different songs stuck in our head.
All right. What did you think of the episode? Did you like this episode? Do you like these type of episodes where they're more about finding these, whatever it is they're looking for, to bring honor to fallen soldiers, people who went down with planes, boats, whatever? Is this your speed of episode, or are you more into the fantastical things he goes looking for?
It's all about fortune and glory, baby.
Fortune and glory, kid. Let us know in the social media posts below, or in the comment below the social media. You know what to do.
Hopefully.
Thank you for tuning in. As always, share us. Subscribe if you're not subscribed. Review if you haven't reviewed. Like if you haven't liked. Do all of that. It all helps us. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next week.